Howdy, folks. You know what they say, when life gives you lemons, make vegetable lasagna. So, I wanted to start off the episode twofer for today. I want to get more into the productive mindset and see, how efficient I can get this procedure that I want to continue this next year. Necessity is the mother of invention, but diversity is the mother of evolution. So, what does that mean? Well, every evolution has a reason. It's not random chance. There's always some form of reasoning behind it. Some, solar radiative blast, some poisoning, some chromosomal degradation that causes an evolution that just so happens to be advantageous and gets passed down repeatedly. But that doesn't mean that the liberal conceptualization that the only thing to fear is the lack of progress. That's not the case. Fear is definitely the enemy. However, there are certain things that you need to be cautious about, such as chemistry, alchemy, things like that. We can see with the hyperproliferation of poisons that progress has sown the fields and the fruits it has produced are rotten. That is something to be afraid of, really. Now, should you demoralize yourself forever over that? No, absolutely not. But that doesn't mean that the liberal lie that it's only the fear of the future that's holding the past in place. That's complete nonsense. What's really holding back humanity from becoming greater is our comforts, our luxuries. It's what has dissolved every great empire, is the amount of pleasures that their middle class and above could enjoy in their spare time due to the hard work of the ever-increasing population below them. And that caused them to atrophy in their post, and their proper job was no longer able to be done by them. And so the entire thing fell apart because of decadence. Is what it is. Talking about the internet sectors and drama sectors, discussion sectors, internet blood sports, of which Ralph is obviously the victor. Keemstar is somebody that I just can't wrap my mind around, how people think he's serious, how people think he's capable of anything. Like, he has some, drug zombies that work for him and do research for him, but mostly he just steals other people's work. He's behind, like DeSantis. He's behind the work that people have already done on the ground. However, somebody that's genuinely scary in that sector is a man named Milo Yiannopoulos. That guy is genuinely frightening. That person is very capable of destroying you. Keemstar is not capable of changing anything. He's just capable of inflicting people like Boogie 2988 on the world without any benefit to the people he's inflicting it on. But Milo Yiannopoulos, that's a person I wouldn't want to cross. His IQ is probably pretty high. Even though IQ is variable, to have a simultaneously high mechanical and emotional IQ allows you to be both very charismatic and capable of taking notes and utilizing the technology available to you to expedite the dramatic process. 110 to 130 is the funny popular zone in IQ. That's really where you want to be. You can't really go past 130, 135 without getting weird. And I spell with a Y. You get a little strange up there, and you get a little bit, just like Nikolai Tesla, dissociated from Baseline, at least. That's a definite, because you're like 2 degrees above baseline, and therefore you fail to cook up the right way of communicating with other people, because the way that your brain is cooking things is so complex that when presented to somebody with a 90 to 110 IQ, it just kind of falls flat, and the intent put behind it is not transferred. That's no fault of either party. That's just to say, when you separate a certain point, it becomes hard to communicate, and thus, you don't really want to have 160, 170, 180 IQ. You'll get weird, and you'll get less and less successful the higher that goes over 140, based on all of the things that I've seen. A lot of the ways that advertisers, I had this thought when I saw an advertisement earlier, a lot of the way that advertisers catch people's attentions is by taking a common household object and distorting it and desecrating it in some way that people aren't used to seeing. And so this familiarity is disrupted, and then it sticks out in people's mind as an irregularity, other than just foreign and non-processed in the memory banks of the person. I remember the TikTok witches were doing this by like stabbing toothpicks into like lemon halves and then sprinkling cinnamon all over them, and then they would like present this like nasty little, fetish, and it would attract people's attentions because they're like, what the hell is that? And they click on the video, and the video will get a click. And I believe advertising is actually tacked behind that. When people operate without mindfulness, and their perception takes control, but their perception isn't laden with the wisdom of mindfulness, so it's just knowledge and no wisdom. The fake takes hold. Internally first, and then externally second. And then that ripples and has dire consequences. A lot of people will say that the Hitlerian method of repeating a lie over and over again to turn it into the truth is a political tactic worth following up on, but naturally, Hitler, not a very good example of a success, There are so many people on the internet that say, and I quote, Hitler did nothing wrong. Well, what about all the losing? What about having generals that disobeyed your orders? You wouldn't be raging in the Fuhrer bunker if you didn't do anything wrong. You would be calm, cool, collected with the fact that you tried your best, and you'd push away from that failure knowing that you tried. That wasn't the case with him. And it's a sad, sad story, and he certainly isn't the worst person on the planet. But he's definitely a failure. And so the Hitlerian tactic of telling a lie over and over again is a tactic of a loser. AI has made distorted chimeras. You'll see like a squirrel body with a rat tail, and it will screw up your ability to appropriately assess what the heck you're looking at. I believe that over a period of time, that will genuinely prevent people from knowing what anything is, as their ability to define things in their mind is ripped apart by this chimeric generative AI. And I hope everybody has the common sense to try and program your algorithms to contain as little AIs as possible. Fraternize with people that are advancing AI a little bit less friendly like, and, tell the people that are interested in it that so far it has done nothing but cheapen the human experience. It's not some sort of a new god inside of this machine. It is absolute sludge. Like, the SpongeBob episode where they were making Krabby Patties out of fake stuff, and it's all gray when they take a bite inside. You just look at that stuff, and it's surface level. It's all gray. It's not realistic. It's a distortion of the truth, and therefore, if you put enough of that into your mind, you will be just as distorted. You will be just as untruthful. You know, the nature that we've enjoyed for so long does not disappoint. But the monoculture that we're creating does. Movies are something we've been obsessing about a lot in this culture, but, you know, it's not really worth it. I like plays better. I don't know why, because you flex your muscle. You build it, you flex it, you utilize it, you stretch it. With movies, you get star power. And then you just take the scene 15 times over until they get it, as close to what you want and imagine as possible. And then you cut it, and it's the same way forever. No deviation. Every flaw perfectly intact forever. Instead of this generative, not artificially, but naturally generative glimmering, glistening of the variety of flaws faceting themselves outwards over time. And so you see a perfect part of the play, one day, and then that same part isn't as perfect the other day, and it creates some sort of a contrast that allows you to appreciate it when it's done right. Movies are sloppy, and they make people really big babies about them. They get so demanding and so repetitive in their, banging on the table for gun scenes and racing scenes and things with fantastically flowing camera work, which is a genuinely impressive feat if you are a good cameraman. That has always been one of the most impressive things in the movie industry, is how the cameramen can utilize their machines to create proper perspective. And that, combined with set builders, is actually what made movies good at all. It's definitely not the director-producers that, mostly the producers that cheapen, and then the directors that take credit for the real work. The Confederacy suffered. It suffered under the weight of its own demoralization. It suffered because of the suffering that it inflicted. And so when it was pitted against the other half of its body, and the other half of its body, though living in a harsher land, though being poorer per person, won due to the heart and soul that it exhibited. The Confederacy inflicted so much pain, and that pain echoed back into itself, that the morale that it had to put forth in the Civil War was lackluster, and it fell flat on its face, even with help from the Masonic Revolutionary French, that it probably would have sold out large portions of our country too had it won. Thank God it didn't win. Speaking of Revolutionary France was one of the most evil post-Enlightenment cultures. You wonder why they were doing so much horrific colonization and terrible, terrible things in West Africa and Indochina. You have nobody to thank but the Jacobins and their sick little twisted game that eventually was puppeted by Rothschilds instead of them. Speaking of which, communism. A lot of boomers like to talk about communism a lot, but ultimately it was a flash in the pan. And naturally it scared them very, very much because they were alive during the height of it. But millennials and Gen Z, they don't know what they're talking about, really. Now, I know my history. I've studied. So I know the evil of state-mandated atheism and what communism actually does. So I despise it, but I'm also not afraid of it because it's gone. And the evils of communism have actually flowed into our intelligent state. And I'll get into this coming up here. The USSR wiki page is absolutely hilarious, by the way. It has almost no references. It's like pure opinions laid out over and over again. No references. Hardly any references. It's definitely not structured like most Wikipedia pages that's constantly annotated with references. And the references it does use is like Noam Chomsky, writing for Jacobin magazine. It's absolute crap. It's very funny to watch, though. if you see the way that it downplays the slaughter of tens of millions of people and says, actually, they advanced things a lot. Yeah, by making the world a much, much more militaristic and bloody and nuclear-ready place. Good job. It's all copying off of China and the Mongols. And China was the seat of invention up until about the 1400s or so, about till the medieval age, when France and Italy, northern Italian city-states in France, really started to innovate, and that eventually took off in England around the 1600s. China, from 5000 BC, innovated all the natural technologies from the animals and plants, trebuchets, gunpowder, all of that. So it took a very long time for us to really invent anything, because us in the West to really invent anything, because, you know, up until the 1400s, the Venetians were still making these firework cannons and selling them to the Ottomans to take down Byzantium and calling that something fancy. But ultimately, it's just a way of selling out your brothers for a few ducats. That's all. Well, we're in history. I want to lay out what the term Viet means from Soviet. It actually comes from oracle bone from 1200 BC. And it's a logograph / hieroglyphic for axe. And that's very interesting because I'm pretty sure that corresponds to the flattening of forests and the creation of more urbanization. That's what Viet means. And Soviet, in the Russian language, which borrows a lot from the East, means information. So the original spooks. Once again, the CIA learned it from Stalin. You know, Islam. Oh, hold on 1 second. Though Vietnam may have inspired Viet, it was named Vietnam by a Nguyen, Gia Long. And Nguyens are... I've never met a person with that last name who isn't incredibly intelligent and also nice. So, it's a, pretty venerable dynasty, if I do say so. And frankly, Vietnam is one of the coolest countries in the world. And if it wasn't for the Masonic French, we would have learned a lot more from them, and they would have been a lot more beautiful and vibrant than they are today, and they probably would have never been communist. You know, it's probably infiltration by the French Masons that pumped that into their society, because they were there through the Annam protectorate of France. So, the religion of Islam is like a combination of Solomonism, which I mentioned on the previous episode, and Romanism. And it's funny that in Anatolia, the Seljuks created a sultanate called the Sultanate of Rum, and that has a little steeple over the U. And I actually noticed that Tolkien created a portion of his universe in the far east that's basically, runic deserts, called Rune, with a U, a steeple over the U, and an N instead of an M. It's not to be confused with the island of Rum, with the Celtic dash over it. I just thought that was interesting, and I wanted to share that. What I don't think is interesting is the word epic. Epic is an awful misused word. It's hardly ever used for anything that's actually epic, like Lord of the Rings, which is genuinely un-epic. And our current system is incredibly self-destructive because of the lack of knowledge, lack of proper definition, and most importantly, the constant pain that we are forced to inflict on other people. That pools pain into us, and that makes us demoralized, squishy, easy to control, and constantly looking for the next coping mechanism, when nothing can actually make up for hurting somebody other than apologizing to them and making it right? Nothing. So keep that in mind when people do you harm and they feel all prideful about it. They will genuinely, trust me, I've died and come back to life. They will genuinely regret it. When their life flashes before their eyes in an instant, and time contracts to a standstill, and they're caught in a web of all of their decisions, their attitude will really shine forth in that moment, and will shine forth in the exact sort of spoiled 2-year-old baby that they've been. So feel sorry for them, forgive them, love them. But don't shy away from criticizing them. You know, I literally called out the black and tans on Kiwi Farms. One person, 2 people, they would come at me, and I was saying, nah, you guys should all come at me at once. I can easily defend myself. I can fend you off one by one. You should all come at me at once. And I challenged them, and they did. I owned up to the challenge. They are no cowards. They are annoying and they are stupid, but they are no cowards. Who hates Indians? The lying, lazy SOBs that are afraid of losing. I don't know, probably. I met one particularly pathetic person on Kiwi Farms chat that I tried to be friends with for the longest time, but eventually just completely flat on his face 180'd and betrayed his long-term friendship with me for nothing. I forgot his name. Some little scumbag who's been there since 2013. And a sick little shit in many ways, but ultimately pathetic because he's an opiate addict who got his job stolen by Indians. I'm sorry, man. You can't just take opiates and code things poorly. There are people, there are grinders out there that will take your job. Sorry. You know, the population density of India has been pushing people out of it for millennia. You know, there's some real proactive / active people, if you know what I mean. One person is mean to you, who cares? When one person's mean to me, it's a veritable drop in the bucket. I got billions of people running through my head. I have thousands of file cabinets with hundreds of papers, graphs, charts, databases, and other things in those file cabinets. So if one person, you know, hooting and hollering, carrying on, that's nothing. What have you won? Are you like Ralph? Did you win Internet Blood Sports? Did you get a big old truck? Did you get to move to Mexico? Did you get to live tax-free? Tax-free, bitch! Oh, brother. Nulling his little antisocial cabal or any other flop era. 2022 was a great time. 2022 was the golden year. It took work, it took building up, and it took me putting a lot of effort into trying to make that antisocial little shit, Josh Moon, a little bit less antisocial. And ultimately, you know, just as he has for decades, he reverted back to his violent, lying behavior. Oh well. He's got the brain of an aggressive pit bull, ironically enough, because he wants to kill all the pit bulls, you know. But he has the exact same attitude as a poorly trained pit bull. You know, the work against antisocial behavior, as you'll see on Caesar Milan, involves stepping down, stepping down, stepping down, stepping down. That's what I tried to do. Didn't work, but maybe something stuck. And hopefully his memory is as poor as I think it is, and he doesn't remember what I did so that he can reject it like the little baby that he is. That's enough of that. Oh, dear Trump, we do not have the morale or the attrition, the numbers to invade Canada. We will not be able to take their soft timber, but we might be able to get the oil in Alberta if we can do a deal with them. So, strike a deal. We're not going to go over our borders, man. That's, a big thing for us. So, I'm gonna get to eating my lasagna. Y'all take care.